we'll be going to our committee chair report. Audit, finance, law and license, standards, and assessment. So you're all on deck. We'll start with audit. The chair of audit is Vice Chair Ellis.
Thank you. We met last month, or just last week, with our audit committee. Yeah, last month, which was last week. And we just had 3 motions to come before the board. One of them will have more clarity. The board made a motion to put 2 FTEs towards school fees 2 months ago, I believe it was. And so that came before the audit committee. And the committee action by Board Member Cummins moved that the committee approve the addition of the school fees consultation project to the internal audit plan as an immediate project priority. And details for this project will be included in a consultation agreement that will be presented to the audit committee in December. So the motion for the board is the committee moves that the board approve the addition of the school fees consultation project to the internal audit plan as an immediate priority project.
Okay. The motion before the board is that the board approve the addition of the school fees consultation project to the internal audit plan as an immediate priority project. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, let's vote. I'll repeat the motion. The motion is that the board approve the addition of the school fees consultation project to the internal audit plan as an immediate priority project. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Voting was unanimous.
Thank you. And I hope you'll all take time to read these summaries because there's other discussions that are had that aren't part of board action. The U-Star program performance audit report is out, and the committee moves that the board approve the release of the U-Star program performance audit report to the public.
Okay, the motion before the board is that the board approve the release of the U-Star program performance audit report to the public. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, we'll vote. I'll repeat the motion, and the motion is that the board approve the release of the U-Star program performance audit report to the public. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Voting was unanimous.
Okay, and our last action before the board, we've had a board member request to look at a couple sets of standards, and the committee wanted to make this a more cyclical approach so that we are just constantly reviewing all of our standards to make sure that they are the best standards available. And so the motion before the board, we don't have a motion before the board, but the committee, this is a committee action that we move the consideration of a cyclical standards performance evaluation audit be taken to board leadership to assign to a standing committee to work with internal audit to come up with questions such as evaluation audit. And so that is going to board leadership to be assigned to a standing committee. So I apologize. So I'm missing one more motion for the board, and I'm just scrolling through last page.
Okay, we have
Just
a
one.
question regarding what's happening in that
Yes,
committee.
please.
Board Member Lear.
And I attended the meeting, and thank you for allowing me to do that. And it was very informative. And one question I had that I made a mental note to ask in the board meeting was that in making this motion, that there be a cyclical approach to standards, that discussion would also include what subject matter would come first. It wouldn't necessarily, there wouldn't be the presumption that the math standards would be the first in that cycle to be analyzed or processed. Is that accurate?
No, so the request from the board member was to begin with math standards, and so our intent, and so part of the committee motion was that I relay to Board Member Cummins, who requested this, that our intent is that we still begin with the standards that she requested. And so this would go to a standing committee with the intent that it comes back to audit committee, and then it would have to be approved as an audit plan. So there's still a lot of opportunity for it to go through a process and be brought back to the full board for approval.
And kind of a follow-up.
Follow-up,
I'm
please.
still not understanding. So you're saying, in a more simple way, yes, there is the presumption that there will be, that the audit committee will start with math, or the board will start with math.
Yes.
Despite the fact that there's, the bigger point is that it will be, there'll be a cyclical approach.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to understand.
Yes.
Because I've got to say then, my final kind of follow-up point is, I don't agree with that. I think if
Right.
it's going to be a cyclical approach, that committee ought to discuss which standards have been, were the last, or the oldest, so to speak, and which are most in need of review. So there ought to be a full opportunity for that committee to examine that, rather than it be a
Well,
presumption.
They are welcome to have that discussion. It would go back to audit before any audit action was taken, and so everything can be moved around, and it would have to go before the full board for final approval, and so you could make that recommendation if you wanted to start, just as Board Member Cummins could make the recommendation for the standards she wanted to begin, so.
And I'm sorry, Chair, but I'm still not getting why it needs to come back to audit, why it wouldn't then just
Well,
be
if we're-
assigned to a committee.
If we're making, so the committee action is to take it to a committee to come up with questions.
Outside
But
of-
audit is the audit committee. And so if we move forward with actually auditing standards, it would need to go to the audit committee to prioritize and work out the details of that audit, which would then come to the full board for final approval.
I'm still not getting it, but
Sorry,
I'll let
I
it go.
apologize. I can
That's
talk
all
to you
right.
about-
I just
Okay.
thought the idea was that it would go to, be assigned to a committee, and it could be audit, but it could be standards and assessment.
Right.
And then that committee would then factor in which standards needed first attention. And you're saying there's another audit
Okay.
step in there.
If I might
Yeah,
just
go
weigh in, because I'm on the audit committee too, the action was that the cyclical standard that we'll come up with was to be, that request
Process.
was to go to board leadership, and it's actually going to be on our agenda in our executive meeting, and then there'll be some discussion there, and it could be assigned to a standard, but to a standing committee and that, but, so they passed it on to leadership, but they're still prepared to act. And so I think after the executive meeting, you'll see a process. I can't speak until after the meeting, but audit isn't driving it. So it'll come out to the full board through a committee. Okay, this is how we're going to address and keep our standards alive, that we have kind of a schedule of bringing them forward by priority and et cetera. So that's what came out of committee. Am I correct, Chair?
Yes, but there has not been an approved audit plan yet, and so that's why it would have to go, before any audit moves forward, it has to be approved, and we have not voted to approve moving forward. It's just a request. And every motion that goes to a committee can be amended, and so if it goes to a standing committee, then, things can change, but the intent. Yes, but that, things are subject to discussion and board vote.
I get that.
Okay.
I get it now.
Okay. Board Member Reby.
So we have a process in place that we look at our standards in a time frame. Isn't that a process that we already have in place? There's
No.
no time standard for that.
That is correct. That's why.
Okay, so right now, like our health standards are 9 and 21 years old. Are we going to put things in the queue that are the oldest?
That's the idea, is to
Okay.
say, maybe old is still good, but
Yep.
but there'll be a priority process, and then we'll start that.
So my question is it going to be, what's the priority, how are we going to come up with the priority list? Is it going to be, I don't want it to be subjective, I'd like to be an objective process where it's the oldest that are reviewed first? Or are we going to come up with a subjective process that we can just change? I mean, I'd like, if we're going to do this in a cyclical fashion, I'd like it to be an objective process where we're reviewing all of them in a timely fashion.
So all these discussions can be had in the committee, and then, so if you're not in a particular committee, which I guess, granted, you're moving on, but you can still come to speak before a committee or make recommendations to a committee. But it all has to come back to the full board. And so there's no intent here to circumvent the board because all these things can be discussed in an open committee. So that the intent, the discussions, the questions, the scope, all of that can all be discussed and defined before we ever move forward, because right now there is not an approved audit. We're in the process of,
Yeah, let's circle back to audit.
yeah.
The committee is saying, hey, let's get board input on where those priorities are and how this is work, and just not look at math, but let's look at all of them. But let's come up with the criteria of how we look at.
Right, so.
So I'm
you're-
not agreeing to a pattern, I'm agreeing to a process that we're going to put
That's
in
right.
place.
There's
Okay,
no-
I just wanted
there's
to
no-
make sure.
Well, the
Discuss
board's not, there's no action. There's no action on this item. This is informative, that the chair chose to make this informative. There's no action today for the board
But as
on
we,
this issue. But there
Okay.
will be in the future.
Okay.
And that's what we're doing, is taking it out of audit, putting it out into another place to create exactly what we're all concerned about. How do we, what do we, so we can manage everyone's expectations, and it's fair and reasonable, and people can be prepared, but we need to create that cycle.
thank you. I just wanted to
Okay.
clarify that I want to have a process in place that's objective. That's all I
Okay.
was asking. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay,
And I apologize, I had in my mind that was one of the motions for the board, so I apologize for.
we're okay,
for that.
Chair.
Okay, so we also had a board bylaws proposed revision, just a little bit of history in Law and Licensing Committee earlier this year. There was a bylaw change, a rule change that removed some of the provisions from rule that were really governing audit, and so the recommendation came from staff to amend the bylaws because that direction that had been in rule is more appropriately housed in our bylaws. And so the motion before the board is that the committee moves that the board approves changes as indicated to the board bylaws.
Okay, the motion before the board is that the board approve the changes indicated to the board bylaws that's in this. Discussion to that motion. Seeing none, I'll repeat the motion. The motion before the board is that the board approve changes as indicated to the bylaws. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Voting was unanimous.
Thank you. And before I conclude, I just wanted to thank our audit staff. I have Director Davis sitting here at the table to answer any questions. For their hard work, audit is a not often loved division, and so, but we appreciate their work. Well, I know, but sometimes the perception is that, anyways, yes. So the superintendent says she loves you, just so you know. So, thank you for your work.
Okay, thank you for being here to answer any questions. Sorry we didn't have any. Okay.